You know, when we come to listen to a sermon, we need to know the preacher is not the only one doing the work. Listening is an act of worship to God. It's a work of the kingdom to listen to what God is saying through his word. When we worship, it's not just the worship leader, it's the congregation coming together to sing. Even if you don't sing and you're just there in the stillness and the silence and you're with us in that place, that is an act of kingdom action, worship, praise to God, because this is a corporate body. No matter what part we play, we are all actively engaging with him if we look to him. And we're doing it together as a family, which is so good. Because even the introverted people amongst us like to see people, don't we? We learned that over the last couple of years. You know, some of us are really introverted, I am, and we like to have our own space, etc. But we don't like to be on our own. And then the extroverted people, well, you always like to be with people, and sometimes to slow down is good and just be, actually, you know what, I don't need to be doing or be with everyone, but actually just to acknowledge, to be in a place with God's people, to be involved in what he is doing is a kingdom act. It's an act of devotion. It's an act of worship. And that runs through the whole of Galatians. It runs through the whole Bible. God comes and meets us in Jesus Christ, and we respond to that. And the whole life of a believer is a life of responding to what Jesus is doing, to what he's doing in us and around us. And then we narrow it down in moments like this where we look at a specific passage. And just to get going, I wonder who's been on a long train journey in the last 5 years, 6 years? Anyone been on a long train journey? Yeah, a few of us, fantastic. Can you tell us about every single station you stopped in and the place it represents? No? No? Okay. Can you tell me about the destination where you ended up? Can you tell me anything about that? Yeah? Fantastic. Can you tell me about the place you left, where you got onto the train? Fantastic. That's great. No, that's true for all of us, isn't it? Why is that true? Why is it I can't tell you about every single train station I go past on a train? Well, put it simply, there's too many of them to know about every single little place. The only time I'm going to know about every stop is if I go from my stop to the next one and get off. That's the only way you're going to know that. There's too many places in the UK alone, in Wales alone, to know every single thing about the places that you go past on the train. The reason you remember the place you begin your journey and you end your journey, the reason you can tell me about the place you visited is because that was your focus. You knew the important stops on your journey. So you remember those. And Galatians 2, verse 11, it's a bit of a jump, isn't it? Firstly, verses 1 to 10, Peter is there with the apostles in Jerusalem. He's talking to them, he's laying before them his gospel to say, look, this is what I preach to the Gentiles. And the Gentiles, and they said, look, that's a good gospel, we bless you in that work. And then suddenly he jumps from there to being back in Antioch with Peter. Now remember, that journey would have taken a while by car, let alone by foot. So why has he jumped so much of that story? It's because he wants us to focus on the things he's bringing to mind. It doesn't take away from the journey. It doesn't say their journey from one place to the other was unimportant. It just says this is the focus. This is what I want to look at with you. And what he looks at is this challenge of Peter that comes out of these two issues. A fear of people and walking in the truth. Now, if I said to you this morning, well, the thing is, the fear of people, that fear, that ended when the Bible ended. You would be like, John, you are either a liar or you've never stepped outside your front door and met anyone. We all know that the fear of people is a very real, present reality in our lives. And we have to grapple with this throughout our lives. We experience it in different ways. When we're children, we experience it in the way of trying to fit in, even if the thing that's being done is wrong. When we're adults and we work, we go along with the crowd. When we're in leadership of something in the house or in the workplace, and someone comes along and you see them doing something that isn't quite right, inside you, you're like, I know what should be done, but there's a little voice in here saying, oh, but you're not really going to pull them up on it, are you? And you've got to overcome that. Fear of people is a very real reality in our modern day. And walking in the truth is the right response to that reality. And look at verses 12 to 14 in our passage. It just says, before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, that's Peter. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in their hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like the Gentiles and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow the Jewish customs? And what he's doing there is he is being a good brother to Peter. Peter, who was the leader in accepting the Gentiles into the church. Remember? He was in the place of Joppa on the rooftop of Simon the Tanner's house in Acts. And what happens? He has this vision from God, and he sees all these unclean animals being descended down on a sheet. And he hears the Lord saying, get up, Peter, kill and eat. Now the Jewish customs said to all of Israel throughout all the years, from the moment they called him into the desert to follow Moses, look, you can eat these things because they're clean for you, and you can't eat those things because they're unclean for you. Obey me in this. And then in this moment, Peter, who's kept the law, suddenly is told, we're moving on from that, Peter. You can do these things because I have told you you can do them. And he ends up going to Cornelius, the centurion. And he goes into the house to meet with them, and he says along these lines, look, you know it's unlawful for a Jew to visit a Gentile, yet here I am because God has told me to not call anything impure that he has called pure. God has told me to do that, so here I am. Yet in this moment, he falls back. And he begins to do what the customs of the Jewish people say to do. Don't eat with the Gentiles. You know, that's not right. So these Jewish people, they turn up and he starts doing this. And Peter says, Paul says to Peter, mate, what are you doing? That's my translation. What are you doing? What you're doing is wrong. And the reason he said that is because he says, look, Peter, you have come so far. You led the church in accepting these people, but now you're going back. Stop it. Remain in the grace that saved you. And I think that's a word for all of us. As life gets busy, as challenges come, as things happen in the family or in the workplace or all these things, we have to be a people that choose resolutely to remain in the grace of Jesus Christ, which saved us. Because we so easily add things onto the gospel. We so easily add things into our faith to say, well, look, I believe and I trust in Jesus, but you know what, if I do it this way or if I add that to it, then it will be all right. Or we see something that isn't quite right. And we say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's only a little one. Or that horrendous phrase, it's only a white lie. What a load of rubbish. That statement is a lie in itself. And we have to be a people that decide every day to say, I am going to remain in the truth of Jesus Christ because it is that truth which has saved me. The problem is, as we make those decisions, fear comes along and it will keep on coming along. And it will try and mug you of the grace that God has given you. It will rob you. Look at this. Fear is a thief. It steals your freedom. It runs away with your hope. It takes your time and your focus. Of course it does. If you know that God has called you to do something, And don't get into the huge stuff, world peace or anything like that. Leave that to Jesus. He can do it. You can't, I'm afraid. But listen to what he says. And if he calls you to do a simple thing in faith and in love, go and do that. Now, fear will say, oh, you don't really want to do that. There's no point doing that. I won't achieve anything. But you say, well, God's told me to do it, and I'm going to go and do it anyway. And then fear comes in. Well, did God really tell you to do it? Do you know what the best response to that little lie is? It's brilliant. I came across it a number of years ago. You say, okay, well look, even if God didn't tell me specifically, is it a good thing that's going to build someone up? Is it going to bless someone? Is it going to help them? Oh yeah, it is. Then go and do it. We don't need the heavens to open to hear him say, thou goest and givest a cardeth to that person over there. You don't need any of that. You just think, you know what, they've gone through it, give them a card. Just go and do it. Do it in love. In the name of Jesus Christ. And what God does through his Spirit then is he takes that simple little act and he turns it into something amazing. Amazing. Because that is how he wants to work. Problem is, Peter and we and all Christians who have ever lived have done this. We've been in the yo-yo effect. Now, I'm not a scientist. I don't think many of us are scientists. But the simple thing with a yo-yo is it goes down and it comes back up, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think that's just like us with grace, isn't it? I think that's like us with Jesus. We know the right things that we should do. And one day I'm doing it. I'm like, yes. Here we are, I'm in the grace zone, I'm doing exactly what Jesus wants us to do, brilliant. And then by lunchtime, or if we're being honest, by the time you're having your morning coffee break at 11, something's come in and you've bounced out of that place. I was praying the other day and I said, oh Lord, I just feel you close and I can just feel you telling me what to do and I just love you. And Lord, in this moment, I just want to say, I give you everything. It was 6 o'clock at night and I said, I can't talk for 7 o'clock tonight, Lord, but at 6 o'clock right now, in this moment, I give you everything. Because one of the keys to trusting Jesus is knowing who we are. Not to put a guilt trip on, not to be like, oh, I can't, but just to be honest and say, Lord, I know that you know me and you love me no matter what. So Lord, when I'm having a bit of a yo-yo moment, and I'm bowing to fear, or I'm slipping into old ways, or I'm developing whole new ways to do stuff I shouldn't do, let your grace be sufficient and call me back. Call me back. I think that's a message the world needs to hear the church saying. I think for so long they've heard the church say, oh, you're not good enough, or all this and all that. And, they may not have actually literally heard that from a church for many, many, many years, but people believe stuff for a very, very long time. And we've got to undo that effect. Where people have false ideas about church, if they believe a wrong gospel, you've got to be perfect, we've got to undo that. And sometimes the work begins by disarming those lies that have come into people's lives. So we say, Lord, keep us in your grace. I love this quote. I came across it in Chris Palmer's book, Essential Leadership. It's actually a quote from this person, Dorothy Bernard, but I love it. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. I absolutely love that. Isn't it good? Courage is fear that has said its prayers. You see, the lie with courage is that people think, oh, courage is when you don't feel fear at all and you just go for it. Whereas actually, if you speak to anyone that's been through anything hard and they're being honest, they will tell you, oh, but I was afraid all the way through it, but I just kept on doing what was right. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's actually the acknowledgement of fear and moving forward anyway. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. It's not a state of mind, it's a decision, it's a choice, isn't it, from the psalmist? I will not fear. I decide not to. And what he's saying there is, I'm not going to bow to it. Because actually courage is just keeping going, doing the right thing despite the fear. And Jesus is our great example of this, isn't he? The Garden of Gethsemane, what did he do? He fell on his knees before the Father and said, if there's any other way, let this cup pass me by. But not your will. Not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours be done. That's Jesus, the Son of God, in his humanity, falling before the Father, saying, Lord, I'm afraid of this. He sweat drops of blood. And that's not just a metaphor. That actually happens when you are in intense fear. You can sweat blood. That's what was happening to him. But in courage, he said, no, I know what you have called me to, and therefore I move forward in it. And this is what Paul is challenging Peter in. Look, I know it's hard, Peter. When these people in the circumcision group come, they're angry. They're kind of okay with these Gentile believers, but they don't really like them. But you, man of God, you need to keep doing what's right. Do not fall back. Because Jesus set you free and he wants to keep you free. And I think that is one of the most important truths of the gospel and of discipleship today. Jesus didn't just set you free, he wants to keep you free and will keep you free. We're talking about fear as an example today, but you and I both know there's so many things that get in the way, isn't there? It's not just fear. We just focused in on that. That's our focus today. Say, look, how do I overcome this? And the only way I know to overcome it is to understand what courage really is. It's not the absence of fear, but it's the willingness to keep going despite the fear and trusting that Jesus Christ is able. Do we believe that? That he is able, that he wants to lead us on, to put in us that same spirit that said, not my will, but yours be done. That we might follow him with all that we are. Because what happens if you allow fear to rob you is that it doesn't just rob you of your joy, it robs the kingdom of your gift. Jesus Christ has gifted his church for works of service, that he might be glorified. And fear, when we let it in, robs us. And it robs the kingdom. And it robs your neighbour of your ability to do what Christ has called you to do. And hear me right, this isn't a call to make yourself do more, to force it. It's not that at all. It's saying, be free to be the man or woman of God that God has called you to be, and enjoy it as you go, because it is for freedom that Christ has set you free, and from freedom comes joy and peace and love and patience and all the other fruits of the Spirit. But how do we do it? It's a nice thought. You can listen to a nice voice. That's when you nod and say, yes, you do have a nice voice, Pastor. Well done. You can do that today. And we can go on and you can look forward, because I know you do, to hearing my voice again next Sunday. I know you do. Don't worry about it. You can look forward to all of that. Or we can ask the real question and say, well, great, how do I do it? I've spent a long time in school. I even stayed back a year, so I've had an extra year on most of the world, all right? Can I remember much of what my teachers said? No. Definitely can't remember any French. That was just a lost cause before I even started, I think. But there are certain things I remember, and I remember them because I connected with the teacher. I connected with the teacher. Music, rugby, sport, art, even history, RE. I connected with the teacher, and I remember their words because I remember them. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to focus in on Jesus and connect with him. If we want to overcome fear, if we want to overcome pride, or if we want to overcome the challenges that have happened, all of those things that happen, take your pick, you know? There's enough for every single day of the year, isn't there? If we're going to overcome that, we've got to focus in on Jesus Christ. Say, actually, Lord, you are the teacher, you are the keeper, you are the perfecter of the faith. Come, help us. Paul puts it like this. If I rebuild what I destroyed, I prove that I am a lawbreaker. He's talking about the Mosaic law. For through the law I died to the law, that I might live for God. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. So how do I do it? I focus in on Jesus. I add to faith what is lacking. I add love. And to love, I add truth. The Christian life is not 1, 2, 3, 4, stop, sign off. It's circular. You keep going back, you keep going around, you keep learning the old truths back and forth, back and forth. And as you do that, every time you go through that cycle, you become a little bit more like Jesus. So, in conclusion, we just say this. Let us welcome Jesus, his truth, into our hearts, into our situation. Let us invite his Holy Spirit into that weakness that we all have. And let us meditate not on fear of what might happen, but let us meditate on Christ, on his truth, on his courage, on his ability to overcome, and in his strength working in us. These are some of the ways we allow him to be Lord of our lives. So let's commit our way to him. Amen.